at governance over the past 60 years since independence. The Scotland-Malawi Partnership, or SMP, exists to support, connect and represent the many individuals and organisations in Scotland with dignified links with Malawi. We receive funding from, but are independent of, the Scottish Government, and they do not fund any of the work that we do relating to governance. These online events proceed and are based on the forthcoming publication Malawi at 60, a political and economic analysis, which is edited by Gift Wasambo Kayira, one of today's speakers, Kenneth R. Ross, and Mzee Herman Yokanaya Mvula. We're grateful to the editors, the authors, and the publishers for sharing these insights pre-publication. Today's webinar, as Nazim says, is entitled Building the Malawi Nation, a Historical Stocktaking, late 1950s to the present. So turning to our speakers. Dr. Gift Wasambo Kayira is an Associate Professor of History at the University of Malawi. He researches the histories of ethnicities, development and poverty in the 20th and 21st century in Malawi. He's published in many journals, contributed chapters to books, is joint editor of Malawi at 60, and is author of The State and the Legacies of British Colonial Development in Malawi, Confronting Poverty, 1939 to 1983. Dr. Paul Chiudza Banda is an Assistant Professor of History at Tarleton State University in Texas and is joining us from the United States today. Paul teaches courses on world civilizations, British imperial history, modern Africa, and the global Cold War. He's published numerous chapters in scholarly anthologies, articles in journals, and his most recent book is The State, Counterinsurgency and Political Policing in Colonial and Post-Colonial Malawi, 1891 to 1994. We've around 90 minutes together today and aim to have time for questions, brief comments and discussions. So as you're listening, please either type questions into the chat or store them up for Paul and Gift towards the end. Please now let me hand over to our speakers, Doctors Kayira and Banda. Over to you.
Thank you. I think they're going to share the PowerPoint slides. Good. So I will start, and then later on my colleague Dr. Kayira or Gift is going to finish the presentation. But that is the title of the our book chapter for this edited volume, Building the Malawi Nation, a Historical Stocktaking, late 1950s to the present. Next slide. So as the title suggests, for us, we were given the task to write a chapter on one of the main aims that African leaders had at independence, which was that of nation building. There were other primary aims, such as enhancing the education sector, economic development, enhancing state stability and sovereignty. But for us, we are looking at the theme of nation building, and we're arguing that there have been several attempts by Malawi's leaders right from the last 15 or so years of the British colonial rule, the post-colonial period when Malawi was under Dr. Banda, and then from 1994 to the present, we are saying that there have been several attempts, but those attempts have been elusive and contradictory, and what we have is that something that there are still some challenges that will need to be addressed as we are going to discuss throughout the chapter. Next slide. Next. So as you said, we are looking at three main periods. The late colonial period, which is mainly after the Second World War, when we'll be talking about the creation of the Nyasaland African Congress and other movements, but mainly the Nyasaland African Congress, where The politicians of that time, they wanted to create a pluralist nation where there would be Europeans, Asians, Africans working together. But we're going to discuss later on shortly that the coming in of the cabinet crisis in 1964 hampered those plans. And then for the post-colonial period, we'll talk about the time when Dr. Hastings Banda or Dr. Banda was in power, where we're saying that the whole notion of nation building was fragile. It was built around the personality of Dr. Banda. He was the life president. Malawi was a one-party state. Dr. Banda ruled the country without a vice president. So everything revolved around the notion that nation building would only happen if and when Dr. Banda was in power. And we're saying that that became problematic in the long run. Next slide. And then after Dr. Banda left office in May 1994, we are arguing that there hasn't been like a lot of efforts apart from the past 2-3 years or so. There hasn't been a lot of effort put by the government to enhance the nation building agenda. And we're going to discuss how Malawians have gone back to creating regional-based or ethnic-based associations. Instead of creating an association or traditions that enhance Malawianness, people have gone back to their own ethnic associations or ethnic identities. Some of that has been led by traditional leaders, but we're also going to discuss later on that even politicians have taken advantage of that, where they are promoting politics of ethnicity, and some of them have been very clear, not just by speaking, but also through their actions, which we're going to discuss later in this presentation. Next slide. So we're using the notion of an imagined community, which was propounded by Benedict Anderson, who's saying that when we talk about a nation or nation unity, it's something that people construct, sometimes out of nothing. Like if you look at Malawi, I think about 16 or 17 different ethnic groups. So after independence, you are really trying to create a nation. You are really trying to say that all these people from these ethnic groups should be part of the Malawian nation, should portray their Malawianness despite the different linguistic or religious, whatever differences they had or Malawians have. One is saying that these people must fall under what we call the Malawi Nation. And we're saying that there have been several challenges, despite the efforts that have been made by political leaders, religious leaders, traditional leaders. We're saying that there have been several challenges, and those need to be addressed as Malawi moves on. As we go towards the next 60 years, we're celebrating 60 years of independence, but looking towards the next 60 years, there are certain things that must be done to make sure that what we call the Malawi nation should really be a nation. Next. So when you look at the African states, which Malawi is, it's always a contested state, especially now that we're talking about Malawi as having a multi-party political system. I think there were sometime 3-4 years ago, there were about 42 or so political parties. I'm not sure about the numbers now, but so you always look at the state as a contested arena, and that's why we're looking at the roles of political leaders. what can they do amidst that contestation? What can they do to enhance, or what have they done to enhance the nation building agenda? Which is what I've said, that what we have in Malawi as the Malawi state is really a state that was created during the colonial period when Malawi was under British colonial rule. So people like Anthony Smith, they call those as colonial states. Other people call them imported states. That these are states that were not created by the boundaries that we have today, not created by Africans themselves. And you see that after independence, the African Union and other leaders agreed that let's just maintain these boundaries that were created by Europeans after the Berlin Conference of 1884-85. So the contestations are taking place in these imported states, in these colonial states, and it's the African leaders have to use whatever means, whatever resources, whatever institutions, whatever structures they have to make sure that there is some kind of unity, national unity in these colonial states or imported states. Next slide. The previous one, the previous slide. Yeah, so this is what I was saying previously, that African leaders, the national leaders, when they were fighting for independence, they did not change before and after independence. They continued with those states that were created by Europeans during the colonial period, and irrespective of the differences that Africans had, the ethnic, religious, linguistic, whatever differences they had. And over the years, we are saying that if you look at not just Malawi, but different African countries, if you look at the coups d'etat that have taken place in Africa since independence, the genocides in Rwanda, and etc., you discover that one of the major causes is the fact that African people were brought together by European colonial rule, and maybe it was easier to hold them together under European colonial rule. But after independence, if you look at African history, the post-colonial states, those weak foundations, after independence, it was not easier for the African leaders to hold the communities together, because really they were just imagined by the Europeans. If you look at Malawi, for example, you find the Yao people, they are in Mozambique, they are in Malawi. You find the Lomwes in Mozambique, Malawi. The Chewas are in Zambia, Mozambique, Malawi. The Ngonis are. So you are bringing together different communities, but you're also separating certain ethnic groups, ethnic communities. And in the long run, that has been a big problem for African states. Next. So if you look at, later on when you read our chapter, you discover that we have used several examples in terms of what African leaders tried to do after independence. Once they discover that these were really imagined communities, imagined states, artificially created by the Europeans, they tried to bring in policies just to make sure that these people in these African states, just to make sure that they feel that they are part of this nation, the Malawian nation, the Zambian nation, the Ghanaian nation, the Nigerian nation. So Nkrumah, who was only in power for about, I think, 9 years or so, 1957 to 66. During that time, he tried to use religion he was a Christian, but he preferred to be called a non-denominational Christian, meaning that he would identify with all the churches in Ghana and trying to unite the people around the arts and other cultural traditions, because he knew that it was going to be difficult to bring all these people together once the British had gone. Now you are Africans on your own. You try to do something that should bring the people together. Next slide. So for Malawi, we are talking about, as we said, from the late colonial period, when just before the end of the Second World War in 1944, that's when we see the establishment of the Nyasaland African Congress, which is like the main nationalist movement that was established in Malawi before it was disbanded in 1959 during the time of the state of emergency. So that political party was established following an amalgamation of the various welfare or native associations, the North Nyasa Native Association and other native associations and other traditional leaders who came together and established the political party. So initially they were moderate in terms of their demands. They were not necessarily looking for immediate independence. But in the mid 1950s, the Nyasaland African Congress welcomes in these young and radical leaders like Kanyama Chiume, Henry Masao Kuchipembere, and others. And these ones were demanding for immediate independence, but they were very young at the time, and they were communicating with Dr. Hastings Kamuzu Banda, who had left Malawi at a very young age, came here to the US, trained in Indiana, Chicago, and then went to the UK, and then later on went to Ghana, where Kwame Nkrumah was his close friend. So they called Banda back to Malawi in 1958. And so they make Dr. Banda to be this messiah, this savior who should come to Malawi, lead the struggle for independence, lead the nationalist movement. And so you see that from that point onwards, everything, the whole nationalist movement is centered around the personality of Dr. Banda. He's even given the powers to establish to choose his own national executive committee. So the whole direction of the movement changes from this, looking at Nyasaland that time as a movement of nationalist leaders, to everything is now under Dr. Hastings Kamuzu Banda. Next slide. So he was given several nicknames, several titles: the Ngwazi, the Lion of Malawi, the Messiah, and so many songs were composed even before independence, like the one that was composed by, I think, Kanyama Chiume, Zonse Zimene and Zakamuzu Banda. Everything belongs to. So the nationalist movement is Dr. Banda's. Malawi's development, Malawi's stability, Malawi's policies, everything revolved around the personality of Dr. Banda, who is the Ngwazi, the savior, the Lion of Malawi. And that's what we're saying became a problem for Malawi before independence, and also during the 30 years that Dr. Banda was in power. Next. So we are saying in the chapter that even before independence, you see that the nationalist leaders, especially those in the Nyasaland African Congress and later the Malawi Congress Party, they wanted to accommodate all people in the country, so Europeans, Asians. There were Asians, the Asian community in Malawi. They sympathized with the plight of the Malawi Congress Party, the Nyasaland African Congress, because they were saying that if India had gained independence in 1947, they were saying that if India was able to gain independence, Africans should also be able to gain independence. So people like the Sakranis and other Asian families in Blantyre, Lilongwe, they were in support of the Africans, especially Dr. Banda and the Malawi Congress Party. And then there were also other Europeans who were in the country, not necessarily working for the colonial government, but some were businessmen or business people, some were lawyers, solicitors, like the example of Colin Cameron, who was in the country, uh, ended up becoming an independent MP, and then ended up working with the Malawi Congress Party, and even became a cabinet minister at independence. So that's the Malawi that these people, the nationalist leaders, were trying to build. That let's bring in everyone, but as we have said, that in terms of unity, everything about national unity will be controlled by Dr. Hastings Kamuzu Banda. Next slide. So if you see from that image, you see that this is just before early 1964, before the cabinet crisis. You see that Dr. Banda is in the middle, is carrying the fly whisk, but the Africans there, but they're also Europeans. I think Colin Cameron should be the front row, if I'm not mistaken, front row, second from right, and then next to him is Masao Kochipembere, Rose Shuambo. You see the Otton Chiras there. So this is what they wanted. This is what they envisaged, that it would be a multicultural country, multi-ethnic country, multi-racial country, but everything will be guided by Dr. Banda under the direction of the Ngwazi, who is going to become the life president later on and was going to rule the country for about 30 years without a vice president. So I'll hand over to Dr. Kayira, who is going to continue from there. Gifts?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Next slide, please. Would you please remind me how many minutes we have for the presentation, especially the minutes remaining?
Thanks very much, Paul and Gift. Really take the time that you want to, Gift. It would be ideal if we had maybe 25, 30 minutes for questions and discussion.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Paul, for setting the background to our presentation. I move on to the second phase that we are looking at, where now Dr. Banda was in power. Eventually, Banda's position would change from a prime minister to a president, and Malawi would become a republic, but eventually Dr. Banda would preside over an authoritarian regime all the way to 1993 or 94. And we argue that that vision of creating a polyglot nation basically fractured with the cabinet crisis of 1964. There were so many differences that really kind of made Dr. Banda's ministers differ with him. One of them was differences in terms of formulation of domestic and foreign policies. The question of for how long, for example, should we have white experts preside over critical areas of state operations, questions of where should Malawi lean to in the global Cold War? Should it move towards the West or the East? And so many other differences. But I think the most significant thing is that most of his cabinet members were extremely disappointed with his authoritarian tendencies. And they were worried, really, that the country was taking a very bad direction. So in trying to correct him, Dr. Banda dismissed three of his ministers, and three other resigned, including Masoko Chipembere. Corinne Cameron resigned too. And of course, others who are not necessarily ministers were ordered to leave. I think the likes of Albert Macadam, who was a very influential missionary in the Branta mission. He was ordered to leave the country. You might wish to know that it was Macadam who kept Dr. Banda's passport when Banda was incarcerated at Guero prison. Next slide, please. Yeah, so following that crisis, Dr. Banda became extremely suspicious with the activities of his former cabinet ministers. And I think the case in point here is that of Chipembere, who was from the Yao belt in Mangochi. And so what Chipembere did, as probably most of us know, was to stage an insurrection against Dr. Banda. And the results were quite devastating. You know, Dr. Banda's regime pretty well set on fire the whole Moto village where Chipembere came from. And then that was 1964. 3 years later, 1967, we see now Kanyama Chiume from rather Yatuta Chisiza, who was of Tumbuka ethnicity, again staging yet another insurrection against Banda from Mwanza district. But I think what we're saying here is that what we had now was the politics of ethnicity will begin to creep in simply because of these high suspicions that are rising in area post-colonial Malawi. So these rebellions obviously were defeated, but the results were quite terrible. Next slide. And so moving forward, what we see is that Dr. Banda eventually, he had a vote of confidence in Malawi parliament. And so he became the president. And so he thought that it was now an opportunity for him to build the nation. But now we argue that I think that agenda of building the nation was marked by so many contradictions. And instead of uniting the nation really, it kind of fractured it. It kept on fracturing the nation as it left so many people disappointed. And so the case in point here was that of declaring Chichewa as an official or a national language in 1969. And so schools, the Malawi Broadcasting Corporation would have to air news in Chichewa, for example. And it also meant that other languages, including Tumbuka, had to be taken off the air, right? And so the implication is that so people from the north, again, became so disappointed. Those from the south, again, extremely disappointed with the events that were unfolding in the sense that other languages were technically hindered from flourishing. Next slide. And again, we noticed that it appears Banda really became, as I said, so suspicious with certain ethnic groups. You know, Zomba in the south was the original capital. It was a colonial capital, and after independence, it was a capital up until 1975, when Dr. Banda made a decision to have it moved to Lilongwe. I think I should emphasize that the decision to move the capital was part of Banda's Guero plan, the plan that he hatched when he was at the Guero prison in Zimbabwe, southern Rhodesia. And that plan also included the construction of the Lecture Road and, of course, the University of Malawi and so many others. But we argue here that the speed with which he moved the capital, even obtaining funding from apartheid South Africa, really tells a story. The argument is that he became so fearful, or perhaps he didn't really trust other people, so much that he felt like having a capital in the predominant Yao society in Zomba would probably do much damage to his own future as a president. But as a result, moving the capital brought some economic dividends to the center among co-ethnics, in this case, the Chewa ethnic group. Next slide. And we also see that Banda now took some concerted efforts to make sure that the youth in Malawi were properly supported. It was a good idea to create the Malawi Young Pioneer, no doubt about that. It became a development arm of the Malawi Congress Party and, of course, the Youth League. All right, but what we are fighting here is really not necessarily the developmental aspect, but the paramilitary arm of the MYP. Next slide. I should explain this better. Yes. So what we're fighting here is basically the paramilitary arm of the Malawian pioneers, which perpetrated a number of atrocities, of course, in the name of Banda, to defend Banda's administration. Those people who opposed Banda's policies quickly felt the long arm of his regime through the Malawian pioneer. Including members of the Jehovah's Witnesses who were declared to leave the country in 1971-72. And the MYP paramilitary wing was the one that was enforcing all these dictates. The argument is you cannot build a nation in that way because you are not necessarily uniting people. You are frustrating so many people. And as a result, instead of them trying to subscribe to a national identity which is uniting enough, they might choose perhaps to subscribe to multiple identities, could be ethnic, religious, regional, and so on and so forth. Next slide. So this was the MYP movement. I mean, they would stage trainings across the country. They are at so many bases just to train the youth. But as I said, a good idea, but perhaps it was fraught with so many contradictions. Next slide. So we also noticed that one other aspect that perhaps needs to be explained here, that kind of fractured this agenda of building a nation is the economic crisis that Malawi begins now to face from the late 1970s, early 1980s, when the structural adjustment reforms were eventually imposed on Malawi, all the way to the 1990s. And I think Malawi has not really recovered from that economic crisis. What's the argument? The argument is, how do you subscribe to a national identity when it doesn't necessarily bring food on the table? So the national identity ought to bring about pride, right, to the people that subscribe to it. But in this case, these economic crises, and even today, they render kind of childish, an idea of being proud of this national identity. So, and again, we cannot blame Banda, but of course, analysts have argued that Banda did contribute towards this economic crisis, particularly because of the manner in which he handled the economy from the early 1960s. I think this is something that perhaps we can discuss much later, but suffice it to state that the economic crisis meant that many people could no longer believe, in the early vision that nationalist leaders had. I mean, taking after Kwame Nkrumah's edict, seek ye first the political kingdom and everything shall be given unto you. So if we can't have food, what's the whole idea then of us clinging on to this freedom and the national identity that it brings? Next slide.
Go back. Yeah, there.
No. Next slide.
Next.
Yes, this one. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, so now we transition to the post Banda era from 1994 to this point, this time. So what we notice here is that the post Banda's leaders have not fared any better. I mean, they too, I think, have not done a good job in trying to build the Malawi nation. And as a result, what we are also seeing here is that many people who got extremely disappointed with Banda's authoritarian regime are now falling back on ethnic-based associations. So you'll notice that Morocco Olomo, for example, was established in 2008, and Mzimba Heritage Foundation or Association was established much earlier than Morocco Walomo. And then we had Chefu, now the Chewa Heritage Foundation getting revived. So the question we're raising here is that why is it that we have all these cultural associations which are akin, to the native associations, the first one being formed in 1912? Why are they flourishing this time around? All right, perhaps it's a symbol, all right, showing that people are extremely disappointed with the national identity. And perhaps the best that they can do now is to cling on to these ethnic identities, which are similar, of course, to the native associations. They feel like perhaps it is there that they could find something fulfilling, as opposed to putting trust and confidence in national identity. In other words, they look to the future for a revision of what obtained over a period of 30 years, as opposed to sanctioning and sustaining it. Next slide. Yeah, but we're also noticing something that perhaps could be disastrous here, in the sense that these associations are becoming kind of politicized. Okay, they're basically used for political leverages. It's not wrong to promote unity and diversity. It's something that is quite okay. But I think what it becomes problematic when ethnicities become politicized, when ethnic associations become extremely politicized, and they become the most significant symbol when it comes to distribution of state resources. So in other words, what we're seeing here is not necessarily the unity that we saw in the early years of independence, or the unity that the nationalists did envision. Remember, Paul did focus on the role that the Nyasaland African Congress did play, right? In 1944, the NAC was formed, and it fused all the previous native associations. And now we had the MCP, and then the political parties are coming in 1994, so many of them. But again, with multipartyism, what we see is the flourishing of so many ethnic-based associations. It appears that it's becoming extremely difficult really to create a national unity. In other words, these associations are also becoming grounds or breeding grounds for political violence, which threatens, again, the existence of a unified nation state. Next slide. So this is just but a diagrammatic expression of Bingu Mutharika, who was the third president of Malawi of 1993, and became the patron of Morocco Alomo. And of course, he did play a significant role in establishing Morocco Alomo around 2007, 2008. And analysts have argued that Mutharika did have an agenda. Really was to mobilize co-ethnics into making sure that his authority and power is sustained. Next slide. Again, here we see the incumbent President Chakwera, again, heavily identified with Chefu's activities, the activities of the Chewa. I mean, this is just to show that, these cultural or ethnic associations are not devoid of political overtones. There are some aspects that are really causing analysts to raise some eyebrows, say, hey, what are we experiencing here? Because they are more likely to be used for political ends. Next slide. And how about 2020, when President Chakwera established the Ministry of National Unity and Civic Education? And again, later in 2022, the ministry was dissolved. Analysts would argue that it was a very good idea, especially for a country emerging from the political turbulence following the nullification of the 2019 presidential elections rather. we thought that this was a good idea of trying to build the nation. It's an agenda that is still active, okay? But I think in our chapter, we also argue that I think it's something that was poorly executed. It was poorly executed. And look here. So the minister responsible for this ministry was Mr. Timothy Mtambo, who was outspoken when he was a member of the HRDC. You know, it is HRDC that campaigned so hard to make sure that we should have a fresh election, you know, in 2020. And so we are saying that perhaps he was not the best candidate to head that ministry. Because already for others, he was a symbol of division and not necessarily a symbol of unity. All right, so it is these contradictions that we're actually pointing out in the nation building agenda. And perhaps it doesn't come as a surprise here to see that in 2022, that ministry was dissolved. A missed opportunity? Yes, perhaps it is. It is for a country that still remains fragile. Next slide. Next slide, please. The conclusion. Yes, thank you. So this is how we conclude our just go back to the previous slide. All right, thank you. Uh-oh. So this is how we conclude our studies. We, as Malawi commemorates 60 years of independence, we recognize that despite the inherent differences, Malawians have coexisted. We are kind of different from other countries that have experienced open warfare. We have not experienced that in Malawi. And I think this is something that we can build on, right? However, leaders must not take that for granted and must create a deliberate policies that help to inculcate national unity. In other words, the celebration of ethnic, cultural, and political differences must not come at the expense of nation building and national unity. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks very much indeed, Gift. Fascinating. And Paul, for the introduction. I wonder if there are any questions, if you'd like to either pop a question into the chat section or raise your hand. There's lots of applause from Moira and Colin and Eunice online. Does anybody want to start us off? While you're thinking, I'll go first then, if I may. You've spoken of the concept of nationhood or national identity being imagined and created by the Europeans. Would you say a little bit more about perhaps why the strength of alignment to ethnic communities and identities wasn't perhaps recognized or anticipated earlier? Or was it? Was the fusing through the NEC in 44 of the native associations sufficiently binding at the time to think that it was going to work?
I'll start. I think if you look at the history of the Nyasa and African Congress, that was also one of the problems that the party had before independence. They had ethnic differences, regional based differences. But when Dr. Banda came back to Malawi in 1958, those things sort of died. They died down because now there's this Messiah who was out of Malawi for close to 40 years, really. So Dr. Banda in those early years tried his very best to make sure that those ethnic differences should not come out in the open. Even though, if you look at the death of Dunduzo Chiudza in 1962, other people have also said that that was also one of the differences that Banda had with Chiudza were also sort of economic issues, but also ethnic-based differences. So they were there, but the coming in of Dr. Banda as a unifier in the early years assisted to sort of close the open wounds that were there when the Nyasaland African Congress was just established in the 1940s. Gift, maybe you can add.
Not really. Let's just give an opportunity to others to ask questions. But I think the explanation that you have given here kind of suffices. Yes, NAC, you know, there were some quarters that viewed NAC with high levels of suspicion. And I think this also explains why prior to the coming of Banda, it didn't achieve much. And I think the young nationalists did understand that very well. And perhaps this also explains why they invited Banda to come and lead NAC, apart from him being mature enough. And I think what we see here is that immediately after Banda came back from the diaspora in 1958, I mean, NAC was on fire. The whole country was basically on fire. The kind of ethnic affiliations were muted. And I think this became visibly clear even to the European communities. And actually, in our paper, we cite statements from Albert Macadam and how he congratulates Banda for having rebuilt a nation from the scratch. Of course, part of it is kind of exaggerated because it takes away the agency of the young nationalists of the time. Europeans, I think the colonial authorities did. I think they were worried, really, also about their legacy. What sort of legacy were they going to leave for independent Malawi? They really wanted a country that was not really based on one ethnic group or two ethnic group, but one that was multiracial, multicultural, multi-ethnic, but one that was nevertheless united. I think that's why they did encourage democratic pluralism in 1961, and of course later in 1964 rather. As regards the events that followed later, obviously that is exactly what is at the center of Dr. Banda's contradictory nation building policy. I think that's what I can say for now. Thank you.
Thank you both. Linda Dembo, would you like to come in with your comment and maybe any associated question?
Thank you so much, Stuart. My question, first I would want to comment the presentation, that I enjoyed it. And I think I've also been inspired. It was quite interesting to hear the history unfolding from pre-colonial to Kamuzu to the present. And I think what actually caught my ear was about your comment or your finding on the role of ethnic groupings, where you argue that these are actually being used as political entities and actually political influence. I think I would quite agree with you, but I would also want to kind of hear more on your findings in terms of how this has affected the Malawian history. Thank you.
Paul, would you please take that one?
You take it.
No, you take it. Well, that's your bread and butter.
No, you take it. I think it's something that is still unfolding in terms of the role of the various ethnic groups, especially when we, as we are saying towards the end of the chapter, where we see that politicians are not even hiding; they're actively participating in these ethnic based associations. They go there, they put on the attire for that function. They are providing funding to some of these associations and so on and so forth. And if you look at I haven't been in Malawi for 10 years now, but if you look at what is happening now with before the elections, you see that if you are DPP, you go to the central region where Chefo is predominant, you see that you're going to be stoned there. If you are MCP and the other parties, you go to the southern region, where Morocco is strong, you are going to be stoned there, and so on and so forth. And that's our concern, that how far can this go, and where is this going in terms of building one nation, one Malawi, and so on and so forth. So it's good for people to celebrate who they are, celebrate their history, celebrate their languages, but when it becomes politicized, that is our concern. And if you look at countries like Rwanda, Burundi, it was the Hutu versus the Tutsi, and so on and so forth. And that's our main concern, that really are we going to have a nation if people are going to use these ethnic identities and conflate them with political identities? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. David, would you like to come in with your question, David Bowen?
Many thanks to the presenters for a real masterclass. For those of us who are old enough to have been there, the struggle for independence took place very much in the context of the struggle against being forced to be part of the Central African Federation. It was certainly a big deal at the time. You mentioned Banda's titles. One of his proudest one was DOF, Destroyer of Federation. My question is, did this context have any significance for the course of nation building, or was it all sound and fury and in the end signified nothing? Things would have been much the same if it hadn't been for the federal situation.
Maybe I should take that, Paul.
You start, yeah, and then I'll...
So, okay, please, yeah. So I think the answer to David's question could be yes or no. Yes, particularly for those who subscribe to Dr. Banda's ideology, those people who helped to construct the personality card of Banda, those people that were perhaps blindfolded and indoctrinated, the answer was yes. As a matter of fact, women who would dance in Banda's rallies would always sing that song. He is the destroyer of federation, as if he did that single-handedly. But the answer becomes extremely no. I mean, to those people who were extremely disappointed, to those people who are still in exile, to those people who run political parties in exile, for example, to those people who experienced Dr. Banda's atrocities, to members of Jehovah's Witnesses, to the families of the ministers who were dismissed and others disappeared along the way. So it's kind of a mixed bag. We can't really say that it did really lead to national unity, as it were. And I think this is where the contradictions become quite clear. That, well, the same kind of headache, Dr. Banda as a destroyer of the Central African Federation kind of puts us apart, or put the people apart, and brings forth divisions and mixed understandings regarding the nation that the leader was creating. Thank you.
Thank you, Gift.
Yeah,
Paul, do you want to come in on that one?
No, I think Gift has covered everything that I wanted to say. So
thank you very much.
Great. Patrick Grady, would you like to come in with your question?
Yes, thanks, Stuart, and thank you for a really fascinating presentation. I was really interested in what you had to say about the move of the capital from Zomba to Lilongwe, and I just wonder if your research showed anything about any consideration of alternative locations, not least Blantyre, why certain places were ruled in or ruled out, and if you want to speculate a little bit on what might have happened if the capital hadn't moved or if it had gone somewhere else. Thank you.
Paul, do you want me to come in? So you come in later?
Yeah, you start and then I'll come.
Okay. Thanks for this question. I think very thought-provoking for us. We didn't really investigate it, but what I can say is that the idea of moving the capital out of Zomba was not unique in the 70s, nor was it something that should just be traced down to Banda's Guerrero dream. You know, in 1944, 1945, we had floods in Zomba. And when you look at the archive, we have colonial officials discussing that why don't we move Zomba, because it appears Zomba ecologically is not a suitable capital for Nyasaland. And at that time, I think there were talks to move it to Blantyre, Limbi. And there were talks now in terms of how do we move the people out of Ndilande, out of Blantyre, so that at least we can create room for a capital. So it wasn't really the first time. And I think it would be wrong for us to argue here that, well, it was pretty well wrong to move the capital to Lilongwe. But I think what is problematic here is that, number one, there wasn't much debate about the move of capital during the post-colonial period. You see, during the colonial period, there was debate, and so the idea was aborted. But now, during the post-colonial period, there was no debate. It's the question of, this is my Guerrero plan, and I'm moving the capital to Lilongwe. A better alternative, we don't know. But again, what is also, of course, Lilongwe is central located, no doubt about that. But you know, Maputo in Mozambique is not central located. You can still have a capital in the periphery of the country. But I think what is problematic for Lilongwe is that, number one, there was lack of consultation, and that, number two, it was an area that was closer to Banda's co-ethnics. In this case, it's most like the cultural base of the Child people. Number three is the concentration of development activities and development projects that went to Lilongwe. And these are the ones that really, when people looked at them, say, but Lilongwe is becoming vibrant. But look at the North. At that time, the North still remained the dead North, perhaps up until more recently, you know. But for a long time, it just remained the dead North. All right, thanks to the colonial enterprise in the South, that the South still remained relatively active. So these are the issues that scholars are pointing out. The border ports and others have vehemently argued. But I think the decision was poorly executed, and indeed it did have some ethnic overtones. Over to you, Paul, if you have something to add.
Yeah, plus it was also very, very expensive to build the capital at that time, when Malawi's economy was not really doing well. The British government refused to fund the relocation. The Americans refused to fund the relocation of the capital. And that's why Banda had to look to apartheid South Africa, where everyone else was imposing sanctions on South Africa. Banda is saying, no, I can do business with these people because they are going to give me money to build the capital. So something to think about, that why is it that the British were our biggest bilateral partner throughout Banda's era? The British refused, the Americans refused, and then so you also have to think about the money that was spent in building the capital, and just the thought of doing business with South Africa at that time when apartheid was at its peak. The Mandelas were in prison, and other people were in prison, but Banda is saying, so long as they can give me money, then I can do business with them. Thank you.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
Indeed.
thank you.
Hudson, thank you for your patience. You've had your hand up for a while.
Thanks for recognizing me. I have just following whatever it's being discussing here. To my side, it's based on the history. The history, most of the time, we go with the events. So, according to the Banda, we know very well that the books are there to support, also, or even though to criticize. But let us be realistic. Is it Malawi today different from the Malawi that Banda was in charge of? The answer, I hope those who presenting will tell us which really. Is it Malawi different from yesterday related to today? If it's not this different, what is wrong? if there's a way to go, who is ready to take it? And why you are not ready to make it? So these are questions that I want to pose so far. Thanks.
Thank you, Hudson. Gift and Paul, it's bringing us more up to date than the time period mentioned in the title. Are you happy to cover that? Or?
Thanks, Hudson. Obviously, things have changed from when Malawi was under Dr. Banda. As we said in the presentation, that initially Malawi had a multi-party political system up until 1966, when Malawi became a one-party state. So things have moved, things have changed from the time when we were under a dictatorship, which was there from 1966, 64 to 94. So things have changed in terms of the politics. We now have a multi-party political system. Things have changed in terms of the population. I think in the 1960s, we were about 4 million or so Malawians. Now it's just about 20 million. So the population has changed. The economy has changed over the years. New leaders have come and gone. So Malawi, just like any other country, has faced all these changes, and life is dynamic. The economies are dynamic. Politics are dynamic. So things have changed, and that's what we are saying in the paper, that all we need is capable political leaders. The people that we put in power, the people who are leading the nation, what are they doing in terms of enhancing Malawi's economic development? What are they doing in terms of enhancing national unity? Yes, there are all these ethnic associations, but what are they doing to make sure that there's no political violence? To make sure that every Malawian is partaking in the national cake that Malawi has. If Malawi today has mineral resources, are the proceeds from those resources, are they benefiting all people? What are we doing in cases of issues of corruption? Are Malawi's resources only going to a few people? Are people in the rural areas benefiting? You see pictures or videos of people in the rural areas. People still have very poor road infrastructure, even up to date. Very different from when you go to maybe to an urban area. So that's up to the leaders that we choose. What are their visions, and what are they looking to Malawi, as we said, towards the next 60 years to come? Gift?
Well, yeah. Just to agree with you, Paul. Not much to add. That things have really changed dramatically, but I think what has remained constant, okay, is the elusive nature of the strategies we put in place, or perhaps this just lack of strategy. Because building a nation is something that ought to be deliberate. You ought to use everything that your hand can find in order to build one. Okay, and so if it means using sporting activities, for example, use it, so that at least we should be able to build a nation in a manner that everyone feels we belong to this nation. But now, sorry to digress, because it's not my area of expertise. When you look at our national team, soccer national team, consistently losing, and we know the reason. Perhaps it is underfunded, and you cannot really put in resources there. And you know that perhaps things are wrong. If you see that people are still struggling to find water in the rural areas, and you don't even have boreholes, there's no running water. Okay, they're still drinking water from the wells, and you think they should have this pride in this nation. People have agency. I don't think they can do that. So yes, I think things have changed, but the problem is that we still seem not to be serious enough when it comes to building the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gift. Dan Gunn, thank you for your question. Sport's just been touched on there by Gift, but would you like to put your question to both speakers, please? Dan, I don't know if you're...
Yep, hello.
Oh, you're still... Hello there.
Thanks for the opportunity. I was just wondering about sport and what role sport has played in Malawi and to what extent it is seen as a nation builder.
Oh, that's your area problem.
Yeah, I mean, we have, thanks for that question. We have various national teams, the football national team, here they call it soccer, but the football national team, the netball national team, there's hockey. But sometimes people have complained in terms of favoritism, in terms of where the players are picked from. Like if there's a coach from this part of Malawi, maybe they will pick players from their particular region or ethnic group. Plus the issue of funding. Like funding is still a big problem for Malawi's sporting activities. The leagues in Malawi are still not yet professional. So still you find that there's a football player is maybe plays football for a team, a Super League team on the weekend, but maybe during the week they're also working somewhere else. So we haven't yet developed our sports to this kind of international professional level. And that's why you find that if we have a very good player, then they would have to leave Malawi. They'll have to go to South Africa or somewhere else where their leagues are more advanced than what we have in Malawi. But sports, it's really a very good uniting factor, which is what they were doing with the Malawi Young Pioneers. Sporting activities were also encouraged in the Malawi Young Pioneers, where all these young people were brought from. That time we had 24 districts. All the districts contributed young men and young women to the Malawi Young Pioneers, where they were participating in sporting activities. And the Malawi Young Pioneers produced a football team which was called Spearhead. And Spearhead used to play in the Super League in Malawi. And ideally, Spearhead was supposed to have players from all the districts in Malawi. So yes, sport is good, but it needs more. It needs more investment than where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. B. Peary, you're bringing us up to date and seeing what we've learned from history as well. Would you like to make your comment briefly, please?
He seems to be no longer in the meeting.
Aha, thank you. Okay. He says, my comment on governance in terms of strengthening the economy is a country. It's high time we thought like an investment entity where the taxpayers' money are not used for the selfish ambitions of the individuals, but thinking in the limelight of thinking self-reliance, because borrowing would not take us anywhere as a nation. We need to come up with long-term and practical implementation plans beyond 2063. I think that's probably a freestanding statement of opinion. I don't know if speakers you'd like to come in with anything on that, or we'll just leave that one standing.
No, but I think we would both definitely agree with these sentiments. I mean, I think that's the way to go. And I think it's important because it aligns very well with our argument that people need food on the table for them to identify with a particular identity, in this case, national identity. What is it that we have out of this? To what extent are we putting in place better foundation for the realization of Vision 2063? Are we on track towards achieving that? If everyone else wants to move out of the country seeking for green pasture elsewhere, then you just know that perhaps there is a problem. There's a problem. So yes, we should acknowledge we have a problem, but I think through concerted effort, the good news is that at least there's some level of commitment. Malawi 2063 is a very good document. I mean, very good plans, exceptional. If we are really serious about it, definitely we can draw the people towards believing that this is the nation that definitely they can die for, you know. And if we are not careful, perhaps we might come back to 2020 when we cried about Vision 2020, having realized nothing. So yes, I think it all boils down to leadership and how well they're able to mobilize the citizenry. And again, it all boils down to how well they're able to build a strong nation in which everyone is involved and they aspire to contribute towards the realization of the vision. I think that's all what I can say.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the transparency in terms of the use of the monetary resources that we make from whatever natural resources Malawi has. I think there was a complaint about the Kayira mining which is in Karonga, that whatever proceeds were coming from there, no one knew how much money was made and whether there were profits or whatever amount was made. Malawians are not aware of what was coming out of that. So I hear there's oil in Lake Malawi, and there are other minerals, precious stones discovered in Lilongwe, Kasia, Lilongwe. So maybe the transparency in terms of whatever comes out of that, and people know how much money has been realized and where that money has been spent, would also go a long way in making sure that people feel that they are part and parcel of the Malawi nation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very happy to turn back to Hanson, but first I wonder if there's anybody else who's not spoken yet who'd like to ask a question or make a comment.
I have a question. Just reflecting, Dr. Kayira, you highlighted on missionary work, especially highlighting Albert McAdam as someone who was a friend to Dr. Banda. And I'm also aware that missionaries tried or made an attempt to building the nation through Christianity. Can you speak to that?
Yes, exactly. You know, oftentimes when you look at the colonial state, we tend to kind of put everyone into the same bandwagon. That every white person who was in Nyasaland at that time was against the aspirations of blacks. And I think this is not an entirely true version of the story, because we know that there were some individuals, I mean, going back to even from the 1940s, we had missionaries, for example, who really were worried. I mean, they would take the colonial state head on, challenging it, that it needed to be sympathetic to the African welfare. And you know, for a long time, missionaries were the ones who were representing Africans in the Legislative Council. You know, and it's not surprising to see in 1959 you go down to the Livingstone Mission, when there was a directive that all missionaries should leave during the Nyasaland instead of emergence of that year. Missionaries said, no, we're not leaving here. We better die with Africans. You know, and so when you look at the role of people such as Albert McAdam and others in the Blantyre mission, and then you are really amazed to see the goodwill that they had towards nationalists. I did highlight that it was McAdam who really assisted Banda so much. When Banda was incarcerated, he kept his passport and his personal effects. It was McConnell who helped Banda to move from Ghana coming down here, you know, shipping his personal property down here. So there were so many whites really. I mean, it was Cameron who was basically a lawyer for the Nyasaland African Congress, representing many of them who were in the various detention camps in Malawi. So to answer your question, yes, I think the whites and missionaries in particular did play a significant role. I think it's the kind of a role that the church has continued to play over the years. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Gift. Paul, do you want to come in on that one? Thank you for the question, Eunice.
No, Gift is
happy?
Gift is an expert on these things. So.
Excellent. Splendid. Hudson, would you like to come back in?
Not really, but to what I have commented on the chart so far.
Of course.
Most of us were still fighting for our population. We talk about Dr. Banda. He thinks much about the Chiudza people. Even we talk about the Tarikas. They think much about Roma people. We talk about UDF itself. It's for our people. So we're still talking about the ethnics up to date. Why people that are not ready to go for that? It means kingship. There's a need of kingships. We need to strengthen our culture for better Malawi instead of bringing these confusions. This confusion will never end. We'll just talk and write some books. We'll die. Our sons and daughters will read those books. Nothing will change. But we need to structure from the chief. We need to have the strong chief, those who can make decisions, and rate those who are capable to take the position where there's a need, rather than we, so-called educated people. We are looking for money. We are greedy so much. So we need to have a certain instruction that is for kingship. We can accommodate democracy with that system and make things moving. As we're talking today, yesterday, demonstrations in Mzuzu, we have a certain record. One died. Youth, they are fighting with the vendors. Panga knives are there. So we are saying about youth week sometimes back. They are back. They are still youth week in Malawi. So we're talking that. That's why I was asking that, do we have a change? We don't have a change. We're talking about cadets. They are ready to kill. They are ready because they want themselves to be on the top. We are talking about a wrong way. It's not safe place. So when we're talking about Dr. Banda, Dr. Banda Hastings, it's the same issue. It's the same issue. There's nothing else we can say. So when we are writing our books, we need to cooperate some of the activities that are happening at now that were happening before. So we're talking about today. All the Roma people, I don't hide this. They are ready to cast a vote for DBB. When you're talking about the chair, all the chair people, they are ready to cast a vote for MCP. You are talking about the Tumbukas. They are stranded. They don't have party. They feel comfortable. They could go for a vote. You are talking about Yao people. They are ready to go for UDF. So something else which we still have that problem. So when we're coming on the table, we need to come with the honest, the clear picture. What should we do? What next? So the first thing to do is to have a strategy that was already there. Let us make strong chieftainships. Those who went to school, those can make decisions. those that they can bring emotion and come up with the strategy that can be soundable and make Malawi move from where we are to where we are dreaming to be. Failing which, nothing will happen. We'll see blood coming day to day. Wait for this end September, 16th September. You hear Malawi is on the fire again, because people that are ready to kill because they are benefiting from what is happening in Malawi. This is what I want just to share. When you are writing the book, tell us, the youth, what is on the ground that was already happening in Malawi before. Thanks.
Thank you, Hudson,
Yes.
for that heartfelt and very articulately put points. Sorry, Gift.
Thanks, Hudson, for expressing these sentiments. But you know, what I can say is that we as historians, we are not trained very well, you know, in terms of prescribing what could be the right thing, because our trade involves asking questions about the past, problematizing what we're able to see now, and drawing some lessons. And I think what I can say is that if we look at the past, the reason why it took so long for the people of Malawi and elsewhere to organize themselves, beginning to seek for self-rule, is because they remain divided. And you know, indirect rule really divided Malawians so much, to the extent that it was extremely difficult for them to wage a united fight against the colonial system. It was only when they got united in 1944 and when the Nyasan African Congress was established that now we begin to see these people fighting with vigor, fighting with strength, and of course they did achieve results. I'm just wondering whether recourse to chieftainship, for example, would not be taking us back to the pre-1944 era when we remained even more divided. So I really appreciate, but as I said, I don't think we are really well trained to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gift. Paul, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, just to agree with Gift that I think we're not going back to the era when chiefs are going to be in control of, because now we have a country like it's which chiefs are going to be to take the leading role in terms of. So let's trust that when you are voting, you should make a wise decision. That's why they always say vote wisely. But I don't think we are going back to the era where chiefs are predominant. We need the chiefs. We need the chiefs. I come from a chief family. We need the chiefs in terms of organizing our life especially in the rural areas. We need them, but leader, let's look to the politicians and the political leaders that we have in terms of making sure that everyone feels that they are part of this Malawi nation. Everyone feels patriotic. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. With time in mind, I think we need to draw to a close now, but thank you very much indeed to our speakers, Dr. Gift Kayira, Dr. Paul Banda, and to you for making time to join and all of your interest clear from the questions and comments. A recording of the event, the presentations, and a chat log from today will go up online after today's event on the Scotland-Malawi Partnership website. You're very welcome to the next webinar in the series. It's on July the 2nd, starting at 2 p.m. Scotland time, 3 p.m. Malawi time, on Church and State in Malawi, 1924 to 1964, when we'll hear from Reverend Professor Kenneth R. Ross and Professor Scott Spurlock. But until then, thank you very much. Take care and goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.